Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Talent Game podcast. Today, we are talking about everything to be a CFO or Chief Financial Officer. I have two amazing CFOs with me today, Ido and Francesco, and we're going to be diving into their careers, what it means to be a CFO, how to hire a CFO, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'll hand it over to both of them to introduce themselves. How about Francesco? You can kick us off.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you so much, Joe, for having me here. And hi, Ido. So yes, I'm well, as you can imagine from my name, I'm Italian. I live in London. I lived in London for 22 odd years. Still, I have my accent, and everybody find out eventually that I am Italian. I started in strategy consultant a long time ago, but then I moved very quickly into finance. I started into FMCG sort of companies, then moved into media technology, and then gaming. And in gaming, I work for large companies like Electronic Arts or Aristocrat, or smaller companies. For example, one was called Zatica that they were actually listed, but and seeing a bit of everything. So of course I'm a qualified accountant, so I've seen, of course, the accounting side of it, but really getting excited on the commercial side, on the partnering, on the finance monetization, for example. And lately, I moved more and more into what is real money gaming. So in the last couple of years, I work in for a B2B platform and an affiliate marketing company. Still very much focusing on gaming in some ways before, but not directly to consumers as I used to be.
Yeah, brilliant. And always nice to meet a fellow EA alumni, of which it feels like there are thousands in the industry at this point. But yes, sadly,
And all with different stories and
sadly. But Ido, over to you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for having me. And hey, Francesco, I feel like I'm a bit out of the loop now coming out of EA, but hopefully I'll provide enough credentials. I'm Ido. I'm also a foreigner like Francesco. I'm originally from Israel, but I've been in the UK since 2009, and before that in the US. I'm originally an engineer, a computer engineer. And what I say to people jokingly, which is also kind of true, is that I was a pretty crappy engineer. But what I've always thought that I've done quite okay is connect technology with business and finance, connect the product and help translate. And so over the years, I've kind of shifted to the dark side of finance. And when I came to the UK, I did my MBA and then I became an investment banker. Don't hurt me. Became an investment banker all in TMT. And that was really my first foray into gaming. I did a deal where I helped Miniclip with a transaction with Tencent. And then shortly after that, the team at Miniclip, the founder at the time, Rob, and the CFO, Craig, asked if I could join and help build the corporate finance side of things. So that was the first time I stepped into gaming. I spent an amazing 5 years there, really scaling the business. And then took a bit of a break. And my second daughter was born, so it kind of made sense to have a break. There was absolutely no break during that time, just more work than ever. But then joined another shop here in the UK called Avid Games, which is the leading publisher focused on kids, very much a console player, and having two girls kind of worked quite nicely because I could relate to the content. I spent 2 years with Outright, which is a private equity backed business in gaming. It was an interesting experience. And then about a year and a half ago, joined Avid Games. We are an indie developer focused on the TCG space. So I'll put in some shameless plugs throughout this. But we're focused on TCG. We're releasing a new game, a smaller team, and it's been fun and happy to talk about sort of the different experiences in each one.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And yeah, I have three daughters, and I think we've played all of the Outright Games Paw Patrol titles and the Peppa Pig one as well. So there you go. And yeah, we had your colleague Mark on previously on
Amazing.
the CTO episode, and yeah, I also said that I love TCGs. I've played. Well, it was actually when we were chatting at Pocket Gamer a while back, and I started playing Cards Universe and everything after that, and
Awesome.
thoroughly enjoyed it. So nice work. So the first question that I ask everybody before the episode gets started is, what are you playing right now? And I'll throw it back to you, Ido, just because you were the last to talk. So yeah, what are you playing right now?
Sure thing. So a couple of things actually. So shameless plug number one, we are releasing a new game. It's in soft launch. So I've been playing that, but more so just kind of, to give comments on the experience to the team and ones from somebody who's not sort of a big TCG player. So more as a first time user experience. But outside of that, I've been playing quite a lot of Monument Valley 3. I find that's quite a nice game to just kind of like, zone out and lose an hour and a half. And it's a gorgeous game and it's so much fun. And then I have two girls, as I mentioned. And that's quite fun as well because during Christmas, we picked up Just Dance 2026, which I highly
Nice.
recommend. It's a proper workout. It's fun. And then Astrobot has been big around the house. And I use my girls as an excuse to play Astrobot. It's an amazing game as well.
Yeah, great. I only played the first Astrobot. I've been meaning to on my long list of amazing games to play. But yeah, Just Dance. I haven't played a game like that
It's
in
fantastic.
it feels like decades at this point. Also, a good shout out for Monument Valley 3, another London-based game studio, us too. So, yeah, awesome. How about you, Francesco? Anything you're dabbling with, or yeah?
No, I think I'm always constrained with time, so I must admit I focus on mobile games. I've been playing, the Supercell games for quite a while. So Clash Royale and Clash of Clans are my thing, and I consider myself pretty good at them. So maybe that's why I keep playing. I must admit something that every time I play mobile games, and again I've been working on mobile games for quite a while. I always try to have fun, and some of them are definitely competitive, at least for the way I see them. But I always have this sort of a CFO brain attached to that. So I always enjoy the fact that they are really good at retaining, really good at reducing churn. Always try to think, oh yes, they're including this new feature there. Oh, I know what they're trying to do. And I probably because I've been in the industry for a while, that actually pushed me to play even more because I think they have this sort of component, this sort of way of dealing with new ideas of feature that I find it actually quite intriguing and educational in a way. So from a pure financial point of view.
I love that. I can just imagine you like doing in-app spending and being like, wow, they're monetizing me so well.
Yes.
And hundreds of pounds down, you're like, this game, wow, they're really getting my money. Well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, awesome. So let's we're coming up to 10 minutes in, I guess. So we should probably get into the core of the conversation. So I think the first obvious question here when talking about CFOs is like, what is a CFO? At least how, perhaps too broad of a question, how would you define your current role then? So Ido, I appreciate you have almost like two job titles at the moment, but how would you describe your current role as CFO, Ido?
So when you asked us this question, it was kind of more, how would you explain this to an outsider? Because if I had to explain this to Francesco, we'd probably end up talking about taxes and all that stuff, which is riveting, highly exciting, but we'll park that for the time being.
We can do it later
Yeah,
on.
well, yeah. Or maybe not. But I think the way I kind of approach my role is, I want to give the team the tools to execute better on what they do, allow them to focus on the sort of quote unquote, the fun stuff, the fun experience, and help them think about how we unlock growth. So there is an element of keeping the lights on. I think every CFO will always say that, every CFO, every COO, you got to make sure that the basics are there, anywhere from capital to just paying the bills, if we're honest, making sure that payroll goes on time and those kind of things, making sure that you do your taxes on time, of course. But I think where I find the most enjoyment and probably most of my time goes is to sort of enabling the team to step up. So giving them data tools, giving them FP&A insight. So FP&A stands for financial planning and analysis. Really kind of have them think through, if you're going to do this in the game from a gameplay perspective, what does that translate to financially? Have you thought about that, right? And take them through that journey. So effectively, it's really trying to take kind of all the stuff that is not gameplay related away from them so they can focus on the gameplay, on the fun side, and really make magic there. That's how I tend to think about my role.
Brilliant. And how about you, Francesco?
So absolutely on the capital allocation side, that's something that needs to be done. And I think CFO, especially I would say in gaming, needs to always take into consideration this sort of balance between risk and opportunity. Where do I spend my next dollar? Where is the best place to put it? What are the consequences of doing that? I totally agree with Ido on that. The beauty I think of being a CFO, especially I would say in smaller organization, is that you feel, and you probably are, responsible for many other things that are happening around the company that are not necessarily finance, but people think around you that you should know, or you should be responsible, or you should give advice. So, you can be the strategy person like Ido, you can be magically an expert in Brazilian tax, like for some reason I became. You can be an expert. You definitely need to be on the legal side. You definitely need to be on the HR side. Maybe because you tend to be the older guy in the team. So you're always tempted to feel responsible for many things and many aspects. In a sense, especially in gaming, that makes me feel like I'm contributing more to what I actually at the end is a finished product. And that is actually what makes it exciting. I think the industry can be complex. I think gaming can be very complex, but the velocity with which things do evolve constantly ask you to become an expert on many fields that maybe before you were not touching, but now you are supposed to be an expert and give advice to other people in the company. And then absolutely the overall, managing your team and make them grow and being there for them. And really, from my point of view, trying to make them think to the bigger picture rather than being bogged down into details, taking the person that maybe is too much on the numbers and make them then think that probably develop their communication and their way of expressing a narrative is key. It's something that I find it personally very enjoyable. But that's probably is the other side of the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah, great. I think there's an interesting thread there that you both said about the definition of your role, in that the advantage that your industry specialist experience brings. So I think there's some people who might just think, okay, the CFO is the person who handles like all of the accounting and all of the, the money that goes in and out of the business and makes decisions about that. And that is completely separate from product. So there could be an argument to say, well, if I'm a CFO of this gaming business, I could be a CFO at literally any other industry because it's just money and money doesn't change in a company. But actually hearing both your answers, you were talking about helping enable a lot of the entire business. Even like Ido, you were talking about even monetization in the product and the game itself, like, and how that influences gameplay, even things like gameplay, which I think a game designer might be quite surprised to hear if they've never partnered with someone in finance before. So I guess the question is, what advantages do you have from from having industry knowledge about the games? Like what advantages does that bring? And could someone be, and I guess the second part would be, could someone be successful as a CFO in a gaming company without any experience in games? And so, Francesco, I'll throw it to you to answer that first.
Interesting question. So I think at the end of the day, it still is a finance role. So as we were saying at the beginning, you still need to do your accounting right. You still need to do your tax right. You still need to do your budgeting right in as much as you can. But all of that is a given. The excitement comes when you can actually relate to the product, when you can actually sit down with the development people. I used to work a lot with the user acquisition, the online marketing people, and deeply enjoying that sort of interaction because I thought I was actually contributing to at least giving a different point of view, at best at allocating the resources, going back to before, allocating the resources in the best possible way that then is a win-win situation for everyone So in that sense, I strongly believe that you need to be passionate about this. I think we are lucky enough to be in an industry that I find it personally very exciting. Is one of those places where I like to talk to my kids about it, and they are actually quite interested. I have two boys, not no girls, but they are very interested in understanding the economics, or at least I think so, the economics behind the game, and I'm very happy to explain. So I think that sort of passion in the gaming needs to be there. Is actually, when I recruit, I actually ask if, for example, when I used to work for a gaming company, if they were actually play the game and enjoyed it and what they actually would actually suggest. So for me, that is very important. Saying that, you can build it. So maybe you were working in media or in a company making yogurts. I used to work for Danone. But if you have the passion for the industry and the interest, I think it's a massive. I think you start already with understanding what is behind it. And then there is the element of curiosity. You want to learn more. You probably already thought about some of it. You probably thought why you were playing, why there was that sort of a feature there that was actually asking for a microtransaction at that point in the game. So those sort of, curiosity out there to learn what is behind the actual game in itself, I think is important to have. And you can learn it fast as long as you are keen on the industry.
Cool. Ido, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree 150% with Francesco. I think there is the core parts to doing the role, which frankly, most finance professionals should be able to do. And if you're at this level, you probably can do them. And in fact, I've always thought that coming into any industry with experience from another industry is quite valuable. So having a finance person or a CFO comes in who perhaps been on other sides of B2C and can bring a certain sort of toolbox into it is quite helpful. So yeah, 100%. You should be able to step into this and pick it up. And completely agree with what Francesco said. As long as you got the curiosity and the interest in it, I think you'll pick it up. So Francesco spoke a little bit earlier also about building team. When I build my teams, and I've done a couple of hires in the last sort of couple of months, what I care about is people that have the capabilities, the functional capabilities. It tends to be analytical for us because I know that they can solve probably most problems with the same tools that I use and speak the same language. But curiosity is then the next thing that I care about. And actually, that probably takes precedence to your skills, because if you're curious, if you care about this, if you care about the company, if you care about the people and position it in your head however you want to, you will excel. You will sit there, you will do the work, you will sit down on the weekends and do the work. You will not let anything drop, right? And I think that to me is the most important thing. So you just need to be curious and interested in what we do as a business in order to excel in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. And thanks for that. I was also thinking as you were giving your explanations there about ultimately what makes a good CFO. My role at Play Ventures, I'm advising quite a handful of typically early stage companies. And when the conversation comes up about wanting to hire a CFO or a fractional CFO or just finance leader in general, I'm trying to figure out what flavor of CFO they actually mean, because I think that one job title can mean a few different things. So I kind of tend to put it in three different camps, and I would love to know if I'm missing something or if you agree with that. So I think the first one would be more like the accountant CFO. They are coming in to clean up the mess that founders have made. Perhaps, and not throwing any particular founders under the bus, but it might be the company has grown exceptionally fast, or they've done a lot of pivots, so the money has changed, or they've taken finance from different places, and no one in the founding team comes from finance, so it's perhaps not been in their skill set. So bringing in someone to clean up and then long term ensure that there's rigor. So I kind of think of that as like the accountant CFO, right? I think the next one could be like much more strategic. I think one that is like partnering closely with other C-levels, especially could be monetization of the product and thinking about working with the CEO. I guess much more like revenue focused. And I think the last one might be really focused in on like M&A and fundraising and I guess, making those deals happen. Like, oh, we want to bring in a CFO to hit the next series of funding or to exit or something like that. As kind of how I kind of go into that conversation with those three broad categories. Do you want to clean up? Do you want someone to help you be strategic with your product? Or do you want to actually fundraise or exit? I was wondering that in your experience, how would you describe the different flavors of CFO? Is there anything there that I'm missing? And I'll throw it to Ido, sorry, first.
All good. You see, I told you, Francesco, everything and anything.
Yeah.
All good.
I caught myself pronouncing your name
Well,
wrong.
I'll respond with yo at some point as well.
Yeah.
So as we said, yes, I agree with you. I'd probably bucket your 2 and 3 kind of together. So to me, that first category, the operational, probably more so than a CFO, I'd call it a controller, if I'm honest. And I've been in situations before Avid, and when I'm kind of in transition, where people say, "I want the CFO," and then you sit with a founder and you say, "What do you actually want me to do?" And you realize they want you to set up systems and processes, and that's a controller more than a CFO at this point. To me, a CFO is really that strategic side of things. It's the partnering. It's thinking about your growth story, thinking about your narrative, thinking about your equity, capital allocation, like Francesco said. Somebody that can connect the commercial reality and the product reality with the finances, with the balance sheet, with the cash flow. So somebody that sits at that level and can talk to the investors. I'd say this probably in the last 2-3 years, there's been a rise of another type of CFO, which is the restructuring CFO, where you need to come into a business and it's more so than the setting up the controls. It's more so than the strategic. In fact, I don't think it's as strategic. It's just, I need to take this business back to stability. And that is a very different skill set from what I have seen, particularly when it comes to the creative industries.
That third one sounds like the worst. And I'm just joking.
It's a different kettle of fish. We'll put it that way.
No, well, it's necessary though, right? Like, I'm glad you brought it up, like, because the games industry has obviously had this totally turbulent time over coming up to now 5 years, which is mad. It was definitely 2021 where the decline started. But you're right, like these finance leaders who have to make really tough calls to be able to come in and save a business, which often means redundancies or letting go or parting ways with different sections of the business, whether it's people or product or IP or whatever it is, in order to save the whole. I think there has been a rise in that. So sorry, I didn't want to just jump in and be like, it's the worst one, but it's incredibly necessary. So yeah, thanks for that. Francesco, anything to add there at all?
I think, both of you cover very well. Ultimately, it depends on the stage of the company, the size of the company, the culture, and so on, where and what they rather want to have in a particular point in time. Maybe the only one that, because I experienced myself, was the divisional CFO. That is, the CFO of a large or small division inside a larger corporate. And I would say there is maybe not that much work on the operation side. For example, I've been a divisional CFO for 5 years. There was very little on the operation side, like, the accounting, the tax, the legal entities, and all of that. That was managed by some other groups of company. But there was a lot of request on connecting, the division world with the corporate world, the division world with the investors or the shareholders. And that required some sort of different skills in terms of relationship, which I thought they were interesting in itself. But of course, when you then step up to a real CFO role and you need to start looking at the tax, the legal entities, the investors, requirement, a whole set of requirements that you were not actually looking at when you were in a corporate world, it's a different game. It's a completely different story on how you need to split your time and manage your resources around.
Yeah. And it just makes me think when you said the word tax, I feel like the finance gets an unfair rep for being boring. So just to throw it out there, in terms of like tax and finance and everything else. But I have friends and many colleagues that have been in finance, absolutely love it. So I would love to hear from you two. Like, what do you love about like the world of finance within a company? I mean, first of all, do you even agree that it gets the bad rep of being boring? And secondly, what makes it not boring? Like, what do you love about the role?
Can I take that?
Go for it.
Yeah,
I
go
think
on.
tax is actually, so specifically tax, I think is fascinating.
100%.
But maybe in a different way of what you were thinking. So in a sense, it's a great challenge. It keeps changing. It has a massive impact on the company. And if you get it right, nobody notices. If you get it wrong, then you are in big trouble. Let me say that. But it's like an academic paper, right? It's a very challenging academic paper, which have very strong real impacts on the company money, because at the end of the day, that's the cash, that's the tax leakage, whatever you want to call that, you need to pay out. You need to be good at that. You need to understand very well how the flow of cash goes through the entities. That is another fascinating subject if you want to take it in another podcast, and which I've done quite a lot lately. So
But it's not an investment advice or a tax advice, is it?
Of course, yes. I need to say that. I need to have a big disclaimer.
Yeah.
All of those subjects are maybe not exciting as, for example, a marketeer talking on spending money on a particular feature on a website, or a product guy talking about how to evolve the game in a particular market. But the consequences are key for the business.
Yeah, and even before, sorry, Ido, before you jump in, I was just thinking that like that one subject, tax, right? I feel like that's such a big influence on where products and games around the world get made, right? Like there are, the UK that have some reliefs, but you look at some other countries and locations that really encourage, startups, even like actually Israel comes to mind, and even a bunch of other countries over in Eastern Europe now that are like really thriving and growing because they understand what the businesses need at various stages. So that, sorry, it definitely isn't boring. In fact, powers everything.
If you get into real money gaming,
Regulation,
the increase in tax in the UK,
Of course, yeah.
the increase in tax in Brazil, those have a massive impact strategically on you. You still want to invest in a country, you still want to develop something in that country. You need to come out with some smart transfer pricing ways of reducing that. You need to stay compliant. So, we go back to the CFO being tons of different roles at the same time.
Istanbul was going to be, and Turkey was going to be the other place where it's like really fast growing now because of that too. Ido. So finance isn't boring, right? Tell me.
No, never. Yeah, I do. So look, like any role out there, every job has got its kind of grunt side of things. Yeah, got to deal with it. It is what it is. But I do think that probably from the outside, for somebody who has never come across finance, because finance is a big area, a lot of times you kind of associate finance with accounting. It is not just accounting. Accounting and controlling, and that's not necessarily boring because there's a lot to do there as well. But people just think invoices, expenses, that's what you guys do 24 hours a day, crack on with that, and that can't be exciting. I think it's far from it. There is an element of it. We spoke about it at the beginning, keeping the lights on. But finance, and to an extent, probably also, Joe, from your world, kind of the people function, it's one of the only function in an organization that literally looks across laterally. You look across every single thing. You have visibility into marketing, into product, into people. And I find that I probably spend most of my time thinking about how we grow sustainably. I spend my time thinking around people and people related matters, because we're a smaller organization. I kind of have to wear that hat sometimes. So I think from the outside, I get it. But once you're in it, it's like there aren't, at least I find this, and Francesco, shout if you disagree, there aren't enough hours in the day to finish your daily tasks, and it's about prioritizing whatever is important. It'll be strategy sometimes it'll be people, sometimes it'll be taxes, but it's quite varied.
Yeah. And I love that point as well about being lateral across the whole company, because this is why CFOs are often so fantastic at partnering with CEOs. Like the CEO should know what's happening in every corner of the business. And so, To be able to do your job well, you also need to do the same thing. So yeah, that's such a good point. Also, I was talking about like my role at Play Ventures. Naturally, I have to help hire CFOs quite often. So from being in your role, what do you think are some, well, and this answer may change depending on the size and stage of the business, because between the two of you, you've, I think, gone from huge corporates down to tiny businesses, right? But are there any common threads for what makes a great CFO, or does actually that just change nonstop depending on the size and stage of the business? Even so, looking for green flags and things to really look for when hiring a CFO. Would either of you like to take that?
Try, and then maybe we
I'll
can
jump in
build on
with
that.
corrections afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely, it depends. There should be a section on this. I don't know if you have planned it, or it would be another podcast on the relationship between CEOs and CFOs, which is another story, or CFOs and shareholders. That's another story as well. But I think at the end of the day, you need to change your behavior as a CFO, depending by the situation in which you are in, and depending by the team that you are in, right? So if you are in a certain stage of the growth, you want to be as collaborative as possible. You want to, build the narrative. You want as many people involved as possible. If you are in a moment of crisis, you need to be as direct as possible. So maybe not as close to the to the people around you, but you really need to take decision as quickly as you can for the sake of the organization. So you need to. I think probably the way to say it is that the green light will be for a person that is capable of switching from being very number oriented and focused and determined to finish and closing the books and making sure that the tax are paid and the people are paid and everything is in structure, to the guy that actually is good at a certain point to have a massive step back, build the narrative, bring people in, communicate internally and externally, and everything in between. So those sort of skills are all necessary, I think, in a CFO person. Some of them are more necessary than others, depending by where the organization is in, where and depending, of course, by the size of the organization itself. I'm not sure that if that answered the question.
No.
I try.
I said, or maybe the answer changes depending on the size, stage, product of the business. And in your opinion, it does. But yeah, I don't know. In Ido, is there anything that
Yeah,
you'd add?
I think so. Sorry to jump in. So Miniclip was 800 people by the time I left. Outright was 200, and we're about 30. And there is definitely a difference in technical skill set and what you get involved in. Like Francesco said, like the smaller organizations, you do commercial work in addition to accounting and controls. So different situations, I suspect different geos, different subsectors in gaming, console versus mobile versus iGaming, perhaps even different genres will require different skill set. I mean, I know I had to adapt from casual to TCGs, very different spaces. But then when I think about some of the folks that I've worked with and when I was a bit more junior and the CFOs I really respect, I'd say that there's kind of two traits that I think are quite important, irrespective of the size of the organization. I think the first one is I've always viewed the CFO as the conscious of the organization. So people will always, or not people will always, but you'll have different personalities and some will inevitably look a bit more positive. Some will look a bit more negative. I think it's on you, particularly because you deal with the investors. You should be dealing with the investors on a more daily basis, to kind of say really where you think things will end up. It's not so much about selling at that point. It's just really kind of saying, I think this is how it's going to be. So being honest and true to what the real outcome is. The second bit is, and this is a tricky one. The second bit is low ego. And I'm not going to say no ego because I've heard so many people say this to me, and I don't believe in that. I think ego is actually, I think it's a good thing when ego aligns with where the business is going. Ego makes people do some amazing things. But I've always believed, and Francesco, challenge me if you disagree, I've always believed that as long as if the business goes up and to the right, on the different quadrant, you as a CFO are successful. And I think to get there, you need to be able to say, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to hand this over to this person. I don't know how to do that. People ask you a question. You just say, genuinely, I don't know, but give me 2 days. I'll figure it out. I don't think everybody can do that. I think that takes a certain type of individual, and you probably want that kind of individual in the CFO seat.
So they almost the humility of saying, I need to,
100%.
I need to delegate to someone else and or think more about it before coming back with an answer.
I mean, I pride myself, not pride myself, but I want to bring in people, and I suspect we're all the same, that are way better than me at some point. Because there's no way you can cover legal, data, finance, accounting strategy in one individual, right? And you want to let them run with it and basically support them. I think you spoke about this earlier, Francesco, in their growth. Make them be better than you in your role, because that makes you be successful.
I think is a great point of view. The only point I would make that and probably I'm just rephrasing part of what you were saying before is that I think that requires an enormous ego in a sense. The fact that you are brave enough to say I don't know,
Interesting.
let me come back to you. I think it actually requires a dose of courage that sometimes does require that you are, that you feel that you're actually big enough to say that during a board meeting rather than rambling about or talking about something else and go on a tangent. So that's the only point that maybe I would make is that I think saying I don't know sometimes is harder than not, coming out with a question that is half cooked and
100% agree with
not
that.
very good.
Yeah, you feel vulnerable when you do that. And I think people look to you to kind of have all the answers. But I've always thought, again, this is my philosophy, that those who sit in front of you and supposedly have all the answers, that is the riskiest bit possible.
Yeah. Interesting. Also, Ido, you said about the key definition of success for a CFO is if the numbers going up to the right, then the CFO is successful. Is there a situation where the numbers are going down and to the right, in which you could say that CFO was still successful? So the question is about what is the definition of success in this role, really? And I will throw that to you, Ido, because you
I'm
gave
just
that
I'm just
definition
trying
of
to.
success.
So when you say kind of down and to the right, yo or Joe, what are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm playing devil's advocate or pushing back a bit. Is there just one singular definition of success in this role? And that is the revenue is going up, or the company. Let's just say the company is doing well financially. Is that can be very quantified as a success metric, or are there actually other things that go into being a successful CFO other than just the money? The money is okay. The money is good for the business.
So fair challenge. As you kind of ask me that, I kind of go, no, there are other metrics as well. Things like probably attrition of your workforce and things like that you don't see on, up and to the right in the financial chart. I guess I've always approached it as that up and to the right is sort of the ultimate measurement that takes everything into account. So, if your workforce is potentially not engaged, that's going to break at some point if people are leaving. You don't see that, but you'll start seeing that because you'll have to hire more people, you spend more, it's going to plateau. So I guess with a grain of salt, yes, it's still an important kind of way. Obviously, there's a lot to it, but I think for me, it's more about being able to enable people to get to that pattern while giving away responsibility. And like Francesco said, just saying, I don't know, I have to bring somebody else who's better at this than me to enable us to get to that trajectory.
From my point of view, I think gaming is amazing at that. Is a metaphor of life. You can go from hero to zero in literally 1 week, right? You have a game that is doing very well, and then all of a sudden something changes, and the new version is not exciting. They put a new monetization there that consumers hate it, and it goes basically down to nothing, and then good luck at making it go up again. And in my opinion, what is very important is even if things go badly, and even if you struggle with cash or with some key KPI, as long as, and this is very hard to do, as long as you keep the communication going and the communication is consistent, and you have a message that is consistent out there, and you avoid surprises with investors, with your team, with the rest of the company, then look, you succeed. Of course, it's much better to have good news, right? I'll rather go there. I'd rather be in that position. I mean, especially in gaming, there is such an incredible volatility out there, and that is so difficult to predict, right? Especially how a new game performs. But if you build that sort of a structure, and with that comes the credibility, right? That you build around the organization and outside, then you do, I think, a pretty good job.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I like that. So I mean, I agree with you both in that. Like, ultimately, if you're to distill success in your role down to absolutely just one thing, then yeah, it's is the company making money? That's fine. But I do love that you're like, well, for that to be a success, all of these other parts, and it's like, it's finance isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's the people and the culture and everything else that comes into play there. So again, going back to CFO touches on literally every part of the business, which is great. You've
On
throughout,
that point, you might
yeah,
be interested to hear, and probably you will cut this bit. Done quite a few. I follow a few due diligence for some large project, whatever, and I work with some external analysts doing that from the city, and their approach was to having these incredible cohorts that were always growing, and you were there, guys. It's not going to happen. I mean, yes, of course, we all want that, and we all want to see that happening. It's not possible. So that's sort of a message, in a sense, prepared
yeah.
the business, the acquiring business, to say, well, actually, it might not go in that direction. What are the scenarios out there? What are the consequences? Ultimately, what is the trade-off? Happy to cut it if you don't feel this.
No. I like that. I was going to say earlier in the episode that you're playing the role of pragmatist or realist in that, and again, going back to that like CEO partnership, that I think sometimes, not always the case, but sometimes the CEO can be more of an idealist, right? They are the vision holder of what the future of the company is going to be. They are the rallying cry of the company, and so sometimes being that other side of that coin, bringing them back down to reality somewhat, and having a holistic view of the health of the entire company is a privileged spot to be in, I think. But the thing, we're coming up to somewhat the end of the episode, and something I haven't asked, but which I'm be really intrigued, is that if someone's listening to this and they aspire to be a CFO one day, like, what advice would you give them? And especially around, like, what are the types of experiences or skills that should they be really focused on getting so that they can eventually be a CFO? We've had so much advice from you both, but I would love something really focused in on that career progression. Yeah, also either of you can jump in on that one.
I can go in, Francesco, if you want. So I take two things on that, Joe. One is very geo-specific. So depending on where you are, have a look at what is required and what is expected of you to become a CFO, and make sure that you're taking actions to get there if you don't have it. I'll give an example. I think in the UK, one of the biggest requirements for a CFO is to be a chartered accountant. Now, in the US, that is not so much the case. You'll oftentimes see people come out of consultancies who do a great job being CFOs. But if you're in the UK and you want to do this, and let's say you come from a banking background and you want to end up as a CFO, start taking steps, start working on becoming a chartered accountant, so that tick box is basically ticked for you when you go for the role. And then the second point, I'd say, kind of touching along the trend of what we've been talking about, I think the CFO is a very strategic, very lateral position. If you're in a more controlling position or more of an operational role, try and get exposure to the more commercial side of the business. Try and support people, even if you just sit there and listen to conversation, because I think we spoke quite a bit about people. And as you step into the CFO role, you want to have exposure to all kind of different experiences. Having seen them, there's a lot of pattern recognition a lot of heuristics that help at least move fast quite quickly at the beginning. So I'd say don't lose sight of the commercial side of things.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Francesco, what do you think?
I completely agree with Ido. I think it's key to going back to the curiosity bit, being out there, understand the product, understand what's going on, being that element in the company that can connect different departments and get to understand how they all work together or how you create synergies across that. If you are a finance analyst, a finance manager, at the beginning of your career is actually key. And is a trait that if you keep developing could really bring a person far. From a more, financial point of view, the biggest advice is, keep an eye on cash flow. EBITDA is nice, but by experience, having that always on check is the biggest trait. And men really trying to do that step back when you look at the numbers, not just okay, this boring VAT reconciliation, but actually what is it bringing? What is it meaning? What is the difference? A particular change in a number, what is actually bringing to the company? That element of thinking outside of I need to finish this task because then I have to start another one and another one. It it needs to change. It needs to be what actually the task means, what is gonna see, what is my boss gonna see out of that, what are the product people going to see out of that, what are potentially even the final users going to see out of that. So take that sort of perspective, I think is key.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think this has been great. If anyone's listening, aspiring to be a CFO, I think between you giving your career stories and what it means to function at that level, and that's some specific advice that's incredibly helpful. Hey, we are coming up right to the end, so I do have one last question for you both that I ask everybody. I always ask the same question at the beginning and the same question at the end. And so my final question for you both would be, what's your favorite interview question? I imagine you both have done a lot of hiring in your time, building finance teams as well as just building teams across the company. So are there any particular one question that comes to mind that you'd love to ask? Yeah, Francesca.
And it depends which roles I'm recruiting, right? At the end, I must admit, considering my history and what I've seen, I'm always very keen on understanding, especially if we're talking about a commercial sort of a finance person, I would say. What sort of a question would be, what sort of decisions have you taken when you're having complete information, which is so typical in the industry. And basically, when you take the decision, have you thought about the downside and what is the downside? And you can understand a lot from the answer.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say I can imagine, but yeah, in your opinion, what would a great answer look like? But also, what would like a bad answer to that sound like?
But I mean, a good answer, it would be a fairly, an answer that contextualized where you stand, an answer that, start to okay, what do I actually need to understand about the company, the situation, the regulation? But depending on the industry, for example, where I am right now, that is a lot on compliance and on regulation. What do you actually do or thought about to reduce that risk? And you can have some amazing answer related with some reducing FX exposure, for example, or thinking about the liquidity that could be attached to that. It could be fairly complicated, but at the end of the day, what really counts and what I like to hear is if you have that extra dollar, right, to spend, how would you spend it, and what are the consequences of that? And if the answer is around what is the return on investment or what is the risk attached to that, that's a great answer. If the answer is I'll place it to the UA spend of the biggest game that we go, well, that's a bit too easy, right? It needs to be contextualized. Will be
Yeah,
work around a bit.
fair enough. You want to like peel back the layers and understand the
Yes.
person. So if they're giving
Yes.
you, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay, that makes sense.
How they think and how they get there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an easy answer, but it requires quite a complex.
yeah,
Sorry, it's an easy question, but it requires quite a complex answer, in my opinion. And as you can see, as you said, it's really about peeling it down.
yeah. Yeah, awesome. No, no, I like that a lot. Nice and open ended as well. But yeah, Ido, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have a favorite interview question?
I always ask people, what's the GDP per capita of South Africa? And I expect a precise answer for that. I'm gonna go slightly to the other side. I ask people at the end of interviews, what do you do for fun? I want to know, what do you do for fun? Because ultimately, that's what our industry is about. It's about creating fun moments. And it's always interesting when you ask people that question, because I think they immediately, because they're interviewing from a gaming business, their first answer will say, I play games. And then you kind of start peeling the onion and you say, okay, what games are you playing? And then you realize that perhaps they actually don't play games. So then it gives you a bit of an insight into personalities, but it also gives you a bit of insight into what they actually do for fun, which is interesting because you might find somebody who is, I'm an avid gamer, no pun intended, an avid gamer, but has just
Yeah.
never been in the industry. So I like to know a bit more about the people that I bring into the team.
Yeah. And so, yeah,
Can ask you a question on that.
yeah, go on.
So what I love that one, and but I'm always worried about the answer. What if a treasurer, for example, I guess it depends by the position. Let me say a treasurer is saying to you that she loves or he loves to jump out of parachuting or something like that. What do you think about that? Or you prefer a person that plays chess?
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Something to
Yeah, a risk fueled treasure. Is that?
I don't know. I don't know. Or maybe it's better.
That's an so I've never had that kind of answer before. I have to be honest, I never thought about that. And I kind of feel like most treasurers will not tell you they like to jump out of airplanes as it is. It's an interesting one. I probably would have to take that and think about it, if anything. I don't know, is the honest truth.
But yeah, I guess the point of a question like that though is that often I like asking these questions actually at the beginning of interviews, because I guess it lowers
Yeah,
the barrier
good shout.
and it makes someone feel more comfortable. But I also get it, like if you ask it at the end, you can end an interview on a very positive note, just asking about them and their experiences and stuff. Yeah, you were saying that, oh great, if they're a gamer then we could talk about games, but I'm assuming like they could talk about absolutely anything they like, and that's the point, right? To get to know them, the person.
Totally. I mean, again, gaming is a form of creative outlet. If they do music, if they do something creative, that tells me that they will appreciate the art of what the industry has to offer and will understand some of the process around that. So it doesn't, I like it if, like we said at the beginning, I actually like it when somebody's not coming from gaming, but appreciates some kind of a creative outlet, hopefully not jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. That's great. All right, awesome. Well, hey, Ido, Francesco, this is the end. So I just say thanks so much for taking the time and coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation today. There's so much good advice in there for anyone listening on what it is to be a CFO, how to hire one, how to be one. There's loads in there. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you
soon.
so
Cheers.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.